in the book of Proverbs, so this is a biblical example or phrase. Iron sharpens iron. Tends to maybe relate to men, or at least explain maybe how it relates to priorities that you bring or want to see here, or men's relations with each other.
Yeah,
Iron sharpens iron.
sharpens iron, and that verse in scripture really talks about how men who are brothers to each other, really caring for each other, have a brotherly relationship, which requires a great deal of personal contact, a great deal of transparency. When we talk about, when we say the term, who is my brother's keeper, what does that mean to men in regard to how we build our relationship, how we be a sense of, certain terms men don't use a lot in their language to each other when we talk about how authentic you want to be, how transparent you want to be. How do you display a genuine love for your male friends and our relationship issue? And that brings up a lot of, for me, it brings up a lot of sad situations when men don't have good functional relationships with other men. When I say functional, to the point where they have a genuine love and concern for that man's welfare. And I've only found two areas in America where men can be somewhat transparent and not have their manhood questioned. That's sports and military. Take us out of those two areas, we are limited in our ability to just have real nurturing, functional, healthy, accountable relationships with other men. That term, like, we'll watch a man self-destruct. We know he's drinking too much. We know he's cheating on his wife. We know he's got all these kind of issues, but we would never take the time to just sit down with the brother and say, "Hey, man, what's wrong? I care for you. I love you. You're the godfather to my children, but I see you slipping, bro, and I don't know. Help me understand what you're going through." And that is a hard conversation for a lot of men to take, to step down that road, because they don't want to be rejected. Because a lot of men that's going through something, and you see what he's going through, you care about him, and if you approach him, you may get rejected. So a lot of men never approach a brother because they know they may get rejected initially. Initially, they may get rejected. And I like to say that we have to be prepared if we get rejected on the first try, to have a decent, honest, open, transparent relationship with a brother that we really care about. I call it compassionate confrontation. Do it in compassion, in regard to, even if you get a harsh reaction from him, like, what you, no, mind your own business. Leave me alone. I'm okay. Don't come back to my house anymore. You gotta be compassionate and say, well, I care about you. I'm not going anywhere. I'm gonna call you. I'll be back next week. I'll be back tomorrow, because I see something I don't like and I care about you. You're my brother. And I think until we get to that point where we can be comfortable to everybody goes through storms and challenges in life. And men, have been so, again, that box been so conditioned that if I'm hurting, if I got something that's really, really, really weighing me down, that I still got to put on this, this I got it all together face, when I really don't. And if it's one thing I have learned over the years, that type of personality, that type of disposition, it creates more problems that most men can't handle. So when men think about doing awful things to people, to another person, or to themselves, I think it starts with, again, going back with, I can't be free with my emotions, because if I am, quote unquote, I'm not being a real man. And it's a tragic way that we have created for men to exist, and trying to give men that freedom. And I hope that's one of the things we're able to do through this show, is to give men freedom to be comfortable with their emotions, and be able to express themselves. And if they are experiencing something that they can't handle, then get some help. Get some mental health. Your mental health is getting a lot of attention
Mhm.
from a variety of people now. And each of us as men, we got to take that personal, that our mental health is just as much important than us, buying some new car or, going to some football game or sports and things like that, wrapped up in that. Take care of yourself. I think that's what I want men to do. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, tell me a bit about what the concept of six men connection is.
Oh, boy. Six-man connection, again, that came to me many years ago. We talked about six-man connection. And actually, where I got that concept from, I think it was in the late 80s when churches used to have, years ago, they used to have these week-long revivals. Start on Monday and go to Friday. Every day you're at church, going to the revival. And the church would bring in a guest preacher to lead the revival. And I got the opportunity to meet Dr. James Perkins. He was at this church in Detroit. He came to First Baptist Church of South Richmond here in Richmond. And that's the church my wife and I attend. This was in the 80s. And he was preaching from 2 Samuel's about this gentleman, this relationship that this young man, King David had a son named Absalom. And Absalom had developed some feelings for his stepsister. And he went to his dear friend, a guy named Jonadab. And Jonadab basically told this young brother what he needed to do. He's the king's son, and if you want your sister, to just invite her into your room, tell her you're sick or something, and then you have your way. So Absalom took the advice and pretty much just he sexually assaulted his sister. And Dr. Perkins laid that out. He called the sermon "Instigators and Pallbearers." Was the name of the sermon. And to fast forward, the sister told her biological brother what had happened. He was all King David's children. And that brother, he planted over a period of years to take revenge on Absalom. And he was a commander in the military, and he told his soldiers to kill his stepbrother Absalom. And the first person to go back to King David to tell King David that his son was dead was, guess who? Jonadab. And how Dr. Perkins put that story together, and I literally raised my son and daughter talking to them about that scripture. I used to tell them all the time, you may meet some Jonadabs in your life. We all may meet some Jonadabs, some people that will give us advice that is literally not in our best interest to follow. And how you determine when we talk about men. But the six-man connection is this question, Warren, that I would ask men. And the symbolism, this is how it starts. I would ask men in group, who's your best friend? Who's your best friend? And it never surprised me that many men, when it came to their best friend, they would say their partner or their wife. They would say their partner or their wife. And my response would always be, why? She's your wife and she's your best friend too? Why are you choosing your wife to be your best friend? And you get all kinds of answers to that. And the one answer that was so consistent that I would get from men all the time was this: well, I don't trust men. And I would always go, what? You don't trust? Why don't you trust men? And the answers I would get would always bring me back to the conclusion was because you think they're going to be like you. They're going to carry themselves like you. They're going to think like you. They're going to act like you. What is it about you can't develop a healthy, functional relationship with other men? And I was fast forward when we talk about six-man connection. I said, well, one thing, brothers, that y'all going to have to realize is that we all are men. And there's one thing, gentlemen, that we all going to do in life. We're going to die. And the easiest part of your death, if your family choose to do a traditional funeral, is to find 6 men to carry your casket. That's going to be the easiest thing they have to do at the point of your death, is find 6 brothers to carry your casket. Everything else, they're going to have to plan with the with the funeral home and all of that to get everything taken care of. But the easiest part of them for your homegoing service is to find 6 guys to carry your casket. They'll never have any problems with that. The problem, gentlemen, is most of us, we cannot name 6 men that we have an open, loving, transparent, supportive relationship with. Most men cannot find 6 men that they have that type of relationship with. Most of us can't. Most of us can't. And that's the challenge, guys, that we need to be able to have that type of closeness, that's what iron sharpens iron is all about, where we have that type of closeness. Again, I've mentioned about men in the military. If you and I were in the military and we in combat and we take an incoming fire and I get hit. And of course, your responsibility is no man left behind. So you're going to do all that you can to get me out of that line of fire. I've been hit. I'm wounded. You get me out of that line of fire. You get me to a safe place, and I die. I die in your arms. I die. You stand over me with my rifle, with my helmet, and you start to cry. No one, none of your other soldiers will question your manhood. Nobody will. Nobody will. We can take it to sports. And we've been playing sports and we've been playing baseball and we're winning every year, states champ every year. We get to our senior year and we're in the final game of the year and we're about to lose that game. You sit on the bench, take a towel and put it over your head and start to cry. Nobody on that team is going to question your manhood. Nobody. But let me come to you or come to any guy that's listening to this broadcast, and I call you and say, hey man, I came home, my wife is gone, the kids are gone, the dog, everybody's gone, and I don't know what to do. I just don't know what to do. And the question I said when I share that with men is, so you get that call, what are you, as my so-called friend, what are you going to do? And most men don't. I've had this response to that presentation so many times of, well, I come to see you and I say, hey, we can go to the club, man. You know, let's relax. Let's go to the club. You know, they find you somebody else. That's the best answer you can give me. Let's go to the club. And I'm sharing with you that I am emotionally damaged. I'm hurt. And I probably is the reasons why my family is gone because of me. Things that I didn't see, things I wasn't doing. But here I am in a very vulnerable state, and the best answer you can give me is let's go to the club. You know, because right now I'm feeling single. You know, I feel like I got to go find me somebody else now because I always need somebody to be with me. When really in those states, I really need to be with myself and try to figure out what's going on with me emotionally. So 6-man connection goes back to the challenge of trying to get men to understand that if you can have brothers that you develop that type of intimate, that's another term we don't use a lot in our culture, intimate, have an intimate, personal, emotional relationship with that you care for each other. You can speak about the love you have for each other and just build that relationship on those principles. Then you can at least say in your life that you had 6 men that really, really, really care for you and love you. That's 6-man connection.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
And it may be difficult to try to develop a sense of intimacy as we talk to people out there in the boonies or out there in listening land. But you did mention another word as well, trust.
Yeah.
And trust may not be quite as hard to encourage men to come into this platform, this opportunity to pull down our shields a bit, pull off our masks, and then begin to trust.
Right.
As we listen to each other and learn, and as we talk back to each other and explain or share with each other some about our own struggles, our own difficulties, and how we can face some of these race difficulties together.
Yes.
So trust is a big word, I think, that we will try to encourage and embrace over the weeks here, because it's going to take that to make a movement.
Absolutely. Yeah.
In another conversation we've had before, you've mentioned this phrase of voices in the woods. I'd like you to unpack that a bit and tell. I'm interested in knowing more a little bit more about that.
Yeah,
Voices in the woods.
Voices in the woods. I tell you, I don't know. Sometimes when these terms come to me, I think it's I don't know if it's God or somebody that's planting these concepts in my head in regard to terms like that, voices in the wood. But voices in the wood are men that I have to give credit to in regard to who's been out on the front line, trying to get parents and legislators and people in America, particularly, to understand this hazardous journey that we put boys on at a very early stages, and they've been doing research and author have books and things of that nature. And my first introduction was Paul Kibble. I mentioned him before when he had this workbook. The title of it, this workbook, is called "Growing Up Male." "Growing Up Male" by Paul Kibble. He's the brother that's with the Oakland Men's Project in the Oakland area of California. And that book, that workbook, was very instrumental in me gaining some skills in regard to some of the things we needed to address with men. And he's been a strong advocate even to this day, still out there advocating for men to understand their unique place in America, but our vulnerabilities that go along with our so-called entitlements. And so he was one that's been trying to get America to pay attention to what we're doing with as far as the social condition of boys in America. I was, I think it was 1990, 99, 98, that for some reason I got the word of Dr. James Garbarino coming to VCU. And he's a professor, and he had authored this book titled Lost Boys. He was talking about the violence that boys learn at an early age and what we need to do to try to address that. So I went to that it might have been a book signing. And I went to the presentation and I brought this book, and I still have that book to this day, called Lost Boys. And again, this was in the 90s when he was talking about this same issue that we're talking about today. So he was a major person doing work around this issue of violence in boys and men that seemed to walk with us through life. Every day. I just tell men in group all the time, pay attention to the number of acts of violence that men commit, local, statewide, nationwide, almost every day. Somewhere in the world, men are doing violent acts. So Dr. Garbarino, he really kind of spelled it out from a research perspective in his work about that. So I tagged him there. And the last one that I tagged as far as Voices in the Wood with this guy named Jackson Katz, Catz. He would travel around to college campuses, and he authored this book called Macho Paradox, and about the violence that men, directly the violence of men would do to women, and what other men can do to try to help stop it. He put the responsibility on men, because his whole premise, it has always been that if this cycle of domestic violence is ever going to be eradicated from American relationships between men and women, men have got to get on the front line. We have to be out there in front addressing these issues with men. That the most effective people to help men to address domestic violence are other men. That's a tall order, because most men don't. You see, women have been on the front line for years advocating for their safety. You see, for years been on the front line advocating for their safety. But men, we've been on the sideline if we've been in the stadium at all. But his whole premise, he did this wonderful exercise where when he would go to college campuses and any group that he would be with, he would ask, and sometimes we have a mixed group of men and women in his presentations, and he would ask them to make a list. He would put a flip chart up for women and a flip chart up for men. He would say, I want you, ladies and gentlemen, I want you to write down things that you do on a daily basis to protect yourself from any type of physical or mental, sexual harassment or harm. What would you do? How would you, as far as your safety walk, wherever you go, what would you do to take care of yourself? And the list that the women would make was they would fill up the chart. The men, the most consistent, whenever I would do that exercise with men about what you do on a daily basis to protect yourself, the most consistent answer I would get in group would be, I don't do nothing. Well, I gotta do anything. Or the other one I would get all the time is carry my gun. Protect myself, carry my gun. But most of the men would say, I don't wake up thinking about what I need to do to protect myself. I can go do anything I want to do. I want to go take a walk or take a run at 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night. I can go do it. Yeah, I don't have to do it. But women, I learned so much from that exercise. The things they have to be conscious of. I can't even go and if I go somewhere to get a drink at a bar, I gotta make sure I keep my glass close to me. I don't accept no drink from people. Put a man's voice on my telephone. Get a big dog. Make sure I got some what do you call that stuff that the little spray that women would carry around with them. Can't think of the name of it. The spray that to protect themselves. Not tear gas, but it's escaping me. But just things that they would do that they have to do to protect themselves on a daily basis. I love this one. Never speak to a person first. A male first. If you're on an elevator, don't make eye contact. Just things like that. That women are constantly be aware of what you're wearing, that kind of stuff. Just the things that they have to do on a day-to-day basis, not to draw unwanted attention to themselves, so to speak. And we just yeah. So he's really trying to get men to be conscious of some of the social lanes we have created where men can walk, entitlement stuff, versus where girls and women can walk.
So these voices in the woods are leaders, initiators, promoters of maybe a more right way to raise boys and a more right way for men to deal with men issues. I mean, they're the sort of the forerunners of that, where we need to create more within this dialogue that we're offering.
Absolutely. And I think if men just take the time to do some research, everybody's now got the social media and Google and all of that. If men just take the time to go in and just type in manhood or healthy manhood, mental health in men, all kinds of information would pop up. So yeah, there's a lot that each of us can do collectively, individually, as in regard to the kind of changes we need to make. And I say this within a couple of weeks ago, maybe last week, it was some congressperson that was at some event, and he said made this comment to the people that was gathered there. They heard him talk about he wanted parents to start raising their boys. He wanted them to raise your boys to turn them into monsters. It was some political place he was doing, some politician guy, and it got a little attention on social media and stuff. Raise your boys to be monsters. When I first did, I kind of chuckled first, and I was kind of saying to myself, brother, you kind of late with that. You kind of late with turning boys into monsters. We've been doing that a long time. So I don't know. He thought he was saying something that was cute or catchy or something new, but no. We've been doing a good job, and the sad part, unintentionally, raising boys, many of them, to turn into monsters.
Yeah. Now, before we run out of time, you mentioned the word women.
Yes.
Now, I know our podcast, it focuses on men, but women probably can teach us a few things. They've been much more ahead of the movement here. Mothers of the movement are out there of those victims of cruelty, police violence.
Mhm.
They're the ones on the forefront,
Yes.
showing us the way.
Right. Right.
What do you think we can learn from women?
I love that. I love that that question. This is personal. Yesterday, my wife and I were in Norfolk. I have a relative, a brother, actually, that's hospitalized. And as we were walking out of the hospital, and this lady, I think she was a nurse, she was coming in to work. And as she passed my wife, she said this, "I love your shoes." And they just, just a short interaction. Women have this way of, and my wife said, she said, "Thank you." She said, "You're welcome. I love those." And I I had been with her all day. I ain't never paid no attention to her shoes. Not in that way. To make a compliment, I said, "There's some nice shoes, baby, you got on." No, but women have this thing, man, about, I just love watching how women, I watch my wife with her friends and my relatives, how they constantly compliment each other. And just always from head to toe. They compliment each other all the time. "I like your hair. I like your jewelry. I like your fingernails. I like your eyelashes. I like your dress." They always finding ways to compliment each other, keep each other uplifted. And I would love to be able to have that type of exchange with men. My wife and I had this routine, and we do it even to this day, that if we were in a mall somewhere and we see a guy that's coming to us and he is dressed nice and he just got his stuff together, we would compliment him. And we would get the biggest smile. And normally he would just say, "Oh, thank you, thank you." But that smile, it was like whatever when he went to put that outfit together, and to get compliments from total strangers, that just lifted his day. You could just see it all over his face. So I'd make that a habit now, that if I see a man that's doing something with his children, or just doing something that brings a certain reaction from me, I would tell him that, "Hey, bro, I see you with your kids, man. You do look good, man. Keep it up." Just something like that, And most men would say, "Thank you, thank you." But we don't. There's so much we can learn from women when we talk about just being natural and having. That's why I just have this thing about men trying to make their wives and their partner their best friend. Because you not giving her, you saying to her, you quote unquote, and this may sound romantic, "You my everything," but she can't be your everything. She can't be your wife, your partner, your counselor, your preacher. They can't do all of that. There's certain things that separates men and women in regard to just some of those innate type of developmental, social, psychological things, that you need somebody that know this walk that we have to walk in our country as a man, that you can relate to as a man. You always say, I think it's this. I think it's this. And I ended with this. I think men have always been comfortable with women because our first real emotional relationship was with whom? Our mothers. And sometimes we try to duplicate that emotional closeness that we've had with our mothers, with women we meet, And I think that creates a challenge for a lot of men, because you're trying to get that same emotional feelings with women you meet, even somebody you may marry, that you got from your mother. And that's not being fair to her, your wife or your partner. You see, she's an individual. She may not be able to bake a coconut cake the same way that you were accustomed to with your mom. Because a lot of women would say, "Well, if you want a coconut cake like that, you go tell her to make it. I'll make it the way I want to make it." And so I think it's those little subtle things that men miss, as far as just being in the space of women, and just pay attention to how they constantly take care of each other in so many ways. And women are, like I say, women are on the front. They're doing so many things now to empower women and just keep women moving forward in spite of all the obstacles. And they can, we talked about this, they can grieve publicly. They do it all the time. We don't. Men don't grieve publicly. How powerful would it be for men who have lost children to all kinds of stuff in America to be able to go before Congress as grieving fathers to request that we do some things different in America? Women do it all the time. They're always doing things. But we haven't crossed that bridge, but now we put it out there. So maybe it can create some momentum for men to be able to understand that we should be able to grieve regardless of where we are. If I'm hurting, I'm hurting. If I try to stuff it and suffocate it, then the only person I'm hurting is me.
Thank you for this insightful conversation. But before we leave, one last question that maybe prompts us into the next session. But I want to know what it is that you'd like men of all colors and ethnicities to embrace through this Counsel of Men podcast effort, or get or take away from it.
Thank you for that question. I think that men, and I'm speaking to men that is on us with this show tonight, that we have to. You see warning out here, African American male, white male. We have to be, as far as men's place, our space in America. We have to do this work together. We have a lot that we can make this life in America better for men, for our sons, and for ourselves. But we got to do it together. We can't be in separate space. We got to do this work together.